The wind howled across the darkened horizon, carrying with it the scent of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Caleb Harding stood on the wooden bridge spanning the wide expanse of the river, his fingers gripping the wet railing. The once steady rhythm of his heartbeat had turned into a chaotic drumbeat in his chest. He was drenched to the bone, his leather jacket offering little protection against the unrelenting storm. Tonight, he wasn't the cool, calculated pool player who won games with precision and charm. Tonight, he was a man standing at the edge of despair. At 28 years old, Caleb had spent a decade chasing dreams he no longer believed in. His life had revolved around smoky bars, dimly lit pool halls, and the soft clatter of billiard balls against each other. He had once been the golden boy of his small hometown, the one everyone said was destined for greatness. But those days were long gone. Now, he was just another man struggling to make ends meet, drowning in debts and regrets. The river below him roared, swollen from days of rain. Its dark waters churned violently, reflecting the jagged streaks of lightning that cut through the sky. For years, locals had whispered about the river, telling tales of sharks that prowled its depths. It was an urban legend, born from stories of exotic pet smugglers who had dumped their illegal cargo into the waters years ago. Caleb had always dismissed the rumors as nonsense, but now, staring into the inky blackness, he felt a chill that wasn't from the storm. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The weight of his failures pressed down on him, heavier than the storm clouds above. The rent he couldn't pay, the tournaments he couldn't win, the family he had pushed away. It all came crashing down at once. A single tear slipped down his cheek, quickly lost in the rain. "Maybe it's better this way," he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible over the wind. He climbed onto the railing, his boots slipping slightly on the wet wood. Below, the river raged, its waters seemingly alive with menace. Caleb's hands trembled as he steadied himself, his mind racing with memories of a life he no longer wanted to live. And then he jumped. The cold hit him like a sledgehammer. The moment Caleb plunged into the water, the icy grip of the river stole the breath from his lungs. He fought to surface, his limbs flailing against the powerful current. Every instinct screamed at him to swim, to fight, to survive, but the river was relentless. It dragged him under, twisting and turning him until he didn't know which way was up. When he finally broke the surface, gasping for air, he was met with another kind of terror. Shadows moved beneath him, darting through the murky water with unsettling speed. At first, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. But then he saw it, the unmistakable dorsal fin of a shark cutting through the waves. Panic surged through him, and he thrashed harder, trying to put as much distance as possible between himself and the predators. But the movement only seemed to attract them. More fins appeared, circling closer, their sleek bodies just visible beneath the surface. Caleb's chest tightened as he realized the rumors weren't just stories. The river was alive with sharks. The first one brushed against his leg, its rough skin scraping his calf like sandpaper. Caleb screamed, a raw, guttural sound that was lost in the storm. He kicked wildly, his heart pounding so loudly he could barely think. Blood. He smelled it before he felt it. A small cut on his arm, likely from hitting the bridge, had opened, and the metallic scent was unmistakable. The sharks were closing in, their movements more aggressive now. One of them lunged, its powerful jaws snapping inches from his foot. Caleb's breath hitched, and he fought harder, his body screaming in protest. The river was winning, pulling him deeper into its clutches. His muscles burned, his lungs ached, and despair began to creep in. This was it. This was how it ended. But just as he felt the cold tendrils of death reaching for him, something else snagged his arm. For a moment, he thought it was another shark, and he braced himself for the pain. But then he realized it wasn't a bite. It was a net. Above the chaos of the river, a small fishing boat bobbed erratically in the storm. Two men leaned over the side, their faces etched with determination. They pulled at the net with all their strength, their hands slipping on the wet ropes. Caleb barely registered their shouts over the roar of the wind and water, but he felt the net tighten around him, dragging him upwards. The largest shark made one last attempt, leaping from the water with jaws wide open. Caleb screamed again, but the net lifted him clear just in time. The shark's teeth snapped shut on empty air, and it disappeared back into the depths. The fisherman hauled Caleb onto the boat, collapsing from the effort. He lay on the deck, coughing violently as he spat up water. His body shook uncontrollably, a mixture of cold, exhaustion, and sheer terror. One of the men, a broad-shouldered figure with a thick grey beard, crouched beside him. His face was lined with age and hardship, but his eyes were sharp and piercing. "You're lucky," the man said, his voice gravelly and thick with an accent Caleb couldn't place. "The river doesn't let many go." Caleb tried to speak, but his throat was raw, and his words came out as a croak. The second man, younger and wiry, handed him a blanket and gestured for him to wrap it around himself. Caleb did so, his fingers fumbling with the coarse fabric. Why did you save me?" he managed to choke out, his voice barely audible. The older man's expression softened, and he placed a heavy hand on Caleb's shoulder. "Because life is precious, even when it's drowning. Remember that." The journey back to shore felt like an eternity. The storm raged on, and the boat was tossed about like a toy. Caleb sat huddled under the blanket, his body trembling as the events replayed in his mind. He stared at the river, now a shadowy expanse of churning water. The sharks were still out there, lurking just beneath the surface. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. When they finally reached the dock, the older fisherman helped Caleb to his feet. "Can you walk?" he asked gruffly. Caleb nodded, though his legs felt like jelly. He stumbled onto the dock, his boots squelching with every step. "What's your name?" the younger man asked, his voice softer than his companion's. "Caleb," he replied hoarsely. "Caleb Harding." The older man nodded. "Well, Caleb Harding, you've been given a second chance. Don't waste it." The fisherman's words echoed in Caleb's mind as he walked through the rain-soaked streets. He didn't know where he was going, but he kept moving, his thoughts a whirlwind of guilt, gratitude, and confusion. He had been ready to end it all, to let the river take him. But now, he couldn't shake the image of those men risking their lives to save him. They didn't know him. They didn't owe him anything. And yet, they had pulled him from the jaws of death. As he passed a small diner, the warm glow of its neon sign caught his eye. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten in over a day. He stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling softly. The waitress behind the counter looked up, her expression a mix of surprise and concern. "You look like you've been through hell," she said, handing him a menu. Caleb managed a weak smile. "Something like that," he muttered. As he sipped a cup of hot coffee and picked at a plate of eggs and toast, he began to think about what the fisherman had said. A second chance. The words felt heavy, filled with a meaning he couldn't quite grasp yet. But one thing was clear. He couldn't go back to the life he had been living. The river had taken everything from him, his will, his hope, his sense of self, and in return, it had given him something he hadn't realized he needed. A chance to start over. For the first time in years, Caleb felt something stir in his chest. It wasn't joy, or even relief. It was something quieter, something fragile. It was hope. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the incredible world of snooker players and stories. If you're as passionate about the game as we are, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a shot. Do you have a favorite snooker legend or story you want to see featured? Drop it in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep hustling, keep aiming, and remember, on the green felt, every game has the power to make you a legend.